In the meantime, though, there was another issue I wanted to raise with you today. It was sort of in the wake of Richard Preble resigning from the Waitangi Tribunal. The former Labour and ACT MP, Richard Preble, who writes a column, I think a weekly or a fortnightly column in the New Zealand Herald these days, he has resigned from the Waitangi Tribunal after having been appointed as one of 8 new nominees by the minister responsible, who's Tama Potaka. Now, the reason he's resigned I'll come to in a second, but one imagines that Richard Preble was appointed to that role after discussions with particularly the ACT Party, of which I believe Richard Preble is still a member. And so I think he was a leader of ACT at one stage, wasn't he? But he has today, or this morning, announced his resignation from the Waitangi Tribunal. The reasons he has given are essentially that he believes that the treaty has been turned into, quote unquote, a socialist manifesto, and that the truth is that the tribunal believes, its secretariat, its staff, and the majority of its existing membership, that the treaty was signed and gives a indivisible partnership to Maori folk and the Crown, and that Maori didn't sign away sovereignty in 1840, which means that they are still essentially a sovereign people with the potential to be a sovereign nation in New Zealand, and that given that the tribunal are not going to be abandoning that philosophy anytime soon, Preble's basic argument is that what's the point of me staying when I will be a lone voice on a tribunal that really does believe that Maori are a sovereign people in this country. Tama Potaka said that he will appoint a new member to minimise any disruption to the tribunal. God, they've got 20 odd of them as commissioners, so I can't imagine that this is going to cause any disruption at all. But, and there were, of course, many of those who argued, particularly from the Liberal left, that Preble's appointment to the tribunal at all was somehow offensive to Maori, because he was so clearly of the fact that his interpretation of the treaty was antediluvian, and he was a strong supporter of the Treaty Principles Bill that was brought in by the ACT Party leader, David Seymour. I don't want to make too much comment on that, except to say that, again, this is a bit like the school lunch issue for me. You talk about misidentifying what the problem is. The problem isn't Richard Preble being appointed and whatever the philosophy is of the Waitangi Tribunal. The problem to me is that the Waitangi Tribunal exists at all. It was essentially established, and that was its role and responsibility, to deal with historical grievances. And that is where it should have finished. The historic grievances that Maori might have had, and particular Maori claimants, iwi and hapu, against the Crown, were the reason why it was established, and they went back to 1840. And I've got no doubt that in certain cases the Crown acted dishonourably, dishonestly, and stripped the rights and responsibilities from Maori claimants that were duly compensated for in awards that the Crown made as a consequence of tribunal decisions. But, and here's the but, why it exists now is anything other than a grievance industry or a grievance factory is beyond me. And it's not the membership of the tribunal that's the issue here. It's that the tribunal exists at all. And the obvious and proper response of this coalition government to the tribunal is not to try and change its membership, its decisions, and potentially its secretariat's ideological thinking. The proper response is to abolish it. By abolishing the Waitangi Tribunal, you've done your job, thank you very much. You've dealt with historic grievances. There have been numerous settlements, apologies, land compensations and monetary compensation provided. Your job is done. Thank you. Now we're going to move on. Thank you very much. But whilst the Waitangi Tribunal is given the powers, the privileges, and has gone off on a very interesting and turbocharged existence into becoming essentially a quasi-Bill of Rights for this country with a particular ethnic lens, then we will not make any progress as a country. And any Maori claimant who feels any sense of grievance that they have not had a particularly untoward influence and into any government decision, whether it relates to water, state care, carbon forestry, you name it, will be able to turn up at this particular tribunal, aided and abetted by various legal funding, and argue a case in which you're going to have a sympathetic tribunal who go, of course, you should be a sovereign people with a sovereign nation, and how can we make that happen? In other words, and perhaps Richard Preble's right, the underlying aegis, the ideology, the administrative structure, the outlook of the Waitangi Tribunal can be nothing other than destructive for the unity of this country. And maybe Richard Preble's resignation highlights that the problem is not the membership. The problem's not the secretariat. The problem's not even the rulings of the tribunal. The problem is that the tribunal exists at all when its job is fundamentally done. Those are my thoughts. What are yours?